Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Each week, we hear real-time stories from athletes and CEOs on how to maximize performance through an endurance mindset. Let's get started. Well, welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Today's guests are the head coaches and co-owners of Campfire Endurance Coaching located in Portland, Oregon. Please welcome Chris Bagg and Molly Balfe. Welcome, team.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us too.
We love talking about endurance. And Molly, I'm going to fire my first question off to you. Tell me how your endurance mindset has impacted your life unexpectedly.
Ooh. I think in really big ways. So I came to the sport not unlike a lot of people with very little background in any of the sports that lead into it, except for swimming. So I grew up a swimmer and I identified as a swimmer, but then I took 10 years off of swimming and just never really thought about what that might do to my swim. And I signed up for my first triathlon in 2006, I think, 2007, and worked with Team in Training, which at the time was sort of at its height. So I was really unhappy in my job as an executive assistant in film and television. And I was looking for something that was a little scary and like a bit of a challenge. And I decided an Olympic distance triathlon was the way to go and signed up for St. Anthony's in St. Petersburg, Florida. And as the event got closer, it became clear that this was something that I was not going to be able to accomplish, that I wasn't totally sure that anybody could run 10K. I'd never run before in my life before signing up for this. And it just seemed really unlikely that, especially as somebody whose athletic endeavors were like maxed out at a 500 freestyle that I did in less than 6 minutes, like it was unfathomable that I could exercise for like 3 hours, maybe more. And so as the event got closer, I got really scared and sort of like, decided I was going to start and see what happened. And then once I crossed that first finish line, it caused like a ripple effect of questioning what other things in my life I might think I was incapable of, and what my life might be different, might look like, and how it might be different if I stopped thinking that I was incapable of things. And that was like probably the most pivotal moment in my adult life. I honestly have no idea what I would be doing if I hadn't stopped to ask myself some of those questions. It led me to go to graduate school. It led me to leave my job in film and then again, leave my job in public health in order to be a full-time triathlon coach. And a big reason why I coach is because I think that that's an important thing for adults to learn. Like there is a lot of emphasis on sport-based youth development, but I think adults benefit from the same principles. So yeah, I think it's been a real impact on my life, and a big impact, and it's caused sort of a shift that has set my life on a different course.
That's awesome. That first finish line analogy is perfect. Chris, I'm going to ask you something similar, but I would like to know how endurance mindset has impacted one of your clients unexpectedly.
Yeah, that's a great question. Good redirect. A lot of the stuff that we try to do at Campfire is trying to remind our clients that like, this is all awesome and it's fun and it's good for you physically. And it's a great way to deal with stress and to challenge yourself and to get faster and see those developments happen in the racing side of things. But we have really been focused on trying to also do the happier and healthier side of our tagline. So we make faster, happier, and healthier athletes. And we have really kind of like built our philosophy around the idea that like most people don't need the additional adversity of an Ironman. Like that's a lot of additional adversity. I mean, everybody's life is really hard already. Like it's a stressful period in history. Probably maybe a little more stressful than others, but maybe not. And we still have people that are like, you know what my life needs? I already have, 2 kids and a stressful job and all these things. I need to pile 20 hours of training on top of that. And then to go and do a very, very difficult event, usually in a hot place, under really hard conditions. So we try to remind people that there is something in them that was sort of hungering for this kind of challenge, and figuring out what that is an important part of your athletic development. It's probably part of your psychological development too, but we are not certified for that. So very often people will bump into things during the racing and training that we're like, that's nice. You should talk to a mental health professional about that. This is all a really long way of saying that over the years, as I've talked to some of the athletes I work with about setting goals and understanding the things that are setting them back in their racing, that they will sometimes take that to their life. There's an athlete that I've coached for a bunch of years who was going through some job changes and wrote me one day, and they said, yeah, like a lot of the stuff that I did in this job change procedure are things that I would not have been able to do if we hadn't worked on this kind of mental mindset in training and racing. And like, those are the kind of successes that I'm like, I really feel like I'm doing my job. Because that's what, I mean, Molly and I both have educational backgrounds. And when you are a teacher, you're helping someone become a better version of themselves. And when I hear something like that goes beyond, I set another PR, I won my age group again, I'm like, great, good. Like, because it shouldn't just be about results. It should be about self-actualization.
That's a really good example. I'm going to continue on this unexpected benefit, unexpected results. As a coach for both of you, and Molly, I'll jump back to you first. As a coach, what have you experienced sort of unexpectedly going into coaching, and now that you've been coaching for all these years?
I think watching the doorways that open up for athletes and like the interests that open up for athletes as they continue to pursue the sport has been really exciting. One of my athletes that comes to mind is a local athlete who came to us really struggling with the swim, and he has put in a ton of work, like in his own personal swim experience, and like, really done a lot of work to address some of like the root causes of fear in open water, which I know a lot of athletes deal with. But this has also made him realize that, like, as an African American man in a sport that like he does not see reflected, he does not see himself reflected in very often. He's gone on to found an organization called the Black Swim Initiative here in Portland, that does a lot of outreach and training to African American swimmers, especially around like swim safety and inclusion in swim. And that's like something, like Chris said before, like that goes beyond those like personal finish lines. That's something now that he's impacting the larger community in a way that I think is really meaningful. And even though I'm not directly involved with it, I'm really proud of that like outcome of coaching, because I think that that's something that will go on to like live beyond any of us, hopefully. So that was something that I worked in New York City. I worked with the New York City public schools for a really long time, something that I think is really important, and that I hadn't really seen much happening in Portland around that. Even though I know there have been some initiatives that have, tried to make swimming a more inclusive environment for people who don't feel like it is, who haven't been traditionally swimming. And I think that's something that has taken a lot of work for him. And he is actually going on to get his lifeguard certification. And like swimming has become a part of his identity, I think, in a way that I wasn't expecting. And that's been amazing to watch.
That's a great story. And it's fun watching Chris's face light up when you talked about, like 2 seconds into the description, he's like, I know who we're talking about. Which leads me to my next question, Chris. Coaching as a pair, you talk to us about how you guys work together. Because many of the conversations I've had and podcasts I've hosted, it's been one-on-one, right? One person coaching to many athletes. It seems as if you two work as a team. Can you talk to us about that and how that dynamic works?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think both of us, like, we joke a lot that we have like a we have like a suicide pact about the coaching company that like we really, it's not a real one. It's metaphor. It's figurative language. That we really don't want to do this kind of without each other. Like we've been really good friends for a long time, and like learning how to manage that alongside running a business is a challenge, you know. Like there's an old cliche, it's like don't hire your friends. And like we're like, no, you can, like, and this is why, and here is it working. It's like any relationship, you know, like when like we were talking about what partnering on a company basis, you know, Molly owns half the company. It's a, you know, legally she is 50-50 owner of Campfire. And we were talking about it, and I remember talking with somebody else about the process, and they were like, oh, financially it's like getting married. And I was like, oh, whoa, okay. This is like a significant commitment. And like any relationship, you know, you've got to talk about stuff, you know, and it can be challenging at times because we're both really busy. Like running a still small, though sometimes doesn't feel small. We have 8 coaches and 75 athletes. Company has all sorts of challenges. You know, it has admin challenges. It has management challenges. I'm reminded in another lifetime, I was an actor. I worked at a theater. I was in the admin building one day, and I heard one of the administrators say, if it wasn't for the goddamn actors, I could get so much done around here. And that's true. And there are times where Molly and I will be like, we haven't really coached in like a week, you know, or like, when was the last time you wrote a training plan? And so it's, yeah, I mean, it is like it's a thing that you've got to keep like touching base about, and remembering that we are both stressed out, and that, you know, sometimes like we forget to check in about things like that. But it's great. Like there are so many kind of like solo shops out there in the endurance space, and I just don't understand how they do it, because it's a lot of work. I don't think it's a great idea, because you end up in this kind of cult of personality style, where the business totally reflects the nature of its head coach. And that can't happen here, because Molly and I have to articulate the vision together. And so there are checks and balances on, like, you know, like if one of us wants to do something and the other person disagrees, like we find a compromise. And then that trickles down to the way that we coach and the way that we work with our athletes and our coaches. We're always learning, you know. Just recently we started differentiating our roles and figuring out like who does what at the admin side and the leadership side. That's been really helpful. But it's always evolving. It's always a process. And like, you just got to keep remembering that like it's one of your best friends on the other side of the desk. And that's really important.
You know, as a solopreneur myself, it's very easy to convince myself on spending, investments, doing it, like taking a day off. You know, it's very, so having a partner, it does bring that accountability. Molly, anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I mean, I think that it is, you know, I have learned a lot through this process of like stepping into what was then CBCG is now Campfire Endurance leadership. And that's been incredible. And I think that, you know, like Chris said, as recently as in the last like several months, we've really started differentiating our roles, because that's, you know, this was already a company. It was already something that was successful that Chris was doing on his own. So much of it was already established, but there was, you know, he clearly wanted to partner on something that was different and bigger and outside of the original vision that he had. So I think we've learned a lot in the process of like unwinding what it is we want to do and how we share that, that I don't think we could have done if we hadn't been friends.
So changing topics slightly, I'm curious about the market in Portland for coaching and endurance and athletics. Give us a sense of, and are you doing virtual training as well, or is this all one-on-one? Give us a sense of sort of the market you're working with.
We are not just in Portland; we are worldwide. But we are mostly we are mostly in the Portland metropolitan area. I would say I haven't looked at the numbers recently, but I would bet like 60% of our folks are in Portland, and then a larger percentage are in like Washington, like outside of the Portland metro area, or in California, somewhere on the West Coast. And the market here is not surprisingly pretty saturated with coaches and with athletes. We have people who are all over the spectrum of history and experience and inclination and talent. And all of those people exist in Portland. When I signed up for my first race in however long ago that was, I was in New York City. So it was a very different environment to be an athlete. And it seemed more of like a hilarious thing to do than it was something that I would continue to do as a lifestyle. But in Portland, lifestyle athletes are everywhere. So, so that's definitely a different approach and a different like clientele. But our hope is always that we can reach athletes who are outside of this area, because what we do is largely virtual, with the exception of like getting someone's video for a swim analysis or some of the camps and clinics that we do. Most of what we do is really done over the internet, and we rarely see our athletes in person. And that is, that allows us to be a lot more flexible and a lot more, responsive to remote training. So yeah, I think that's part of what we struggle with really, though, is trying to get our brand out there, because it is as saturated as Portland is with endurance athletes and coaches. The United States and the world are also. So yeah, there's definitely, I think, something to be said for having a really strong local presence, but still being able to get outside of the local market.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's very easy to put up a website and say you're a coach and help athletes find you. But when you get to the professionalism that you two have, it's a totally different ballgame. But again, it's the branding and getting the message out there. Chris, I'm going to fire back a business question to you. Talk us through your thought process and your of taking on a partner. Like you sound like a solopreneur prior, and you talked about the benefits. That's amazing. But walk us through that process. Like, what did you go through and realize that, you know what, two is better than one in this situation?
I was just drowning. Like I was completely like, I was drowning in work and trying to coach effectively, but also run the business legally. That's a big thing for us. We pay our taxes. We hire, we turn contractors into employees in a responsible way. We pay our employees, in a way that it can eventually turn into like a real career for them. And doing things legally and by the book. You run a business in the tax and finance space. Like it's, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of like, I's to dot and T's to cross. And, I was really like, I don't know if I can swear on here, but just proverbially losing my shit. 2015, 2016 were really like really tough. I almost sold the business, which was hilarious. There's another coaching company on the East Coast that I was being coached by. It was sort of the end of my career. And, you talk to your coach and you talk about things are hard. And he said, well, do you want to talk about us kind of acquiring you? And I said, yeah, let's look at what that would look like. And he said, who would you want to bring with you? And I was like, well, Molly. I think Molly is the coach that you would want to bring over from the coaches that we have. And they were interested in also acquiring our athletes. Of course, that's the asset in this particular case. And what it was going to be was basically Molly and I were going to be given jobs. Like that was the nature of the sale. Because, at the end of the day, you look at the P&L of our company and the balance sheet, like any seasoned tax professional would be like, oh, your business has no value. And, it has value to us, certainly. But that almost happened. And I think it was like I called a friend, and it was the day after Kona, and he was very hungover. And I think he answered the phone from the floor. And, I said to him, I was like, I'm thinking about selling. And I just remember him being like, I don't think you're done with what you're doing. And I was like, okay, that's some really sound advice. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I need a partner. And so then, Molly came on as 10% partner, and it went really well. And a year later, she was a 50/50 partner. So yeah, the thought process was like, I can't do this alone. It's too hard. It's too much. It was affecting my health and my happiness and my racing and everything. So yeah, having a partner was a really big assistance.
Any unexpected benefits that have come over these years that you've worked together that you weren't obviously expecting when you started?
It's so much more fun. Like, we have a Monday, we just finished, we're halfway through our Monday roll up. We have a Monday roll up every week from 9 to 11 a.m. And it's really great. Like, it is such a great way to organize the week and to be like, okay, got my roll up. Like, we're going to do that. We're going to have a list of to-do items at the end of it. Awesome. We can start working through them. It's just so much less alone. Like, that's the problem with like solopreneurship, is like, you're just alone. And you just get caught in like your own ways of thinking. It's lonely. It sucks.
Yeah. How about you, Molly? What unexpected benefits, upside, downside from being a business owner?
On the like humor side, we have like enough hilarious things that have been said that we could start an entire t-shirt company based off of like Campfire endurance. If you're not crying, you're not learning. We have a lot of things that we've said that are hilarious to us now. And we've learned a lot, I think, in how to communicate, and that's been great. But I think just being in this role in the business has caused me to change the way that I see my own like business ability. I don't think, I'm somebody who's been an assistant for a long time, and I've been in sales pretty extensively, but I've never managed before. I've never had employees before. I guess I managed like interns, but not in like a long-term capacity. And those were some real like growth opportunities for me, I think. And there's skills that I gained that I wasn't expecting to, and that I'm really grateful for. I've also learned how little I want to have a boss, like how much I really enjoy being my own boss. And that's been, I think, really important as well. And and other than that, like it is just a lot of fun. It's great to have this kind of responsibility, and it's great to have a teammate who is going to have your back, because times are hard sometimes, and like it can get overwhelming. And I think that is what has made this work for me. Hasn't been knowing that like I can learn, and then when it's time to like look at the rest of my life, that I'm not alone in this. That the business keeps moving.
Chris, you mentioned your drunk friend kept you in the business after Kona. Were you after Kona, or was your friend after Kona? Did he compete in Kona and you found him on the floor? Or
no, I called him. And so I was here. I wasn't there that year. And it was the day after the race, and he wasn't racing, but his wife was, and his wife had done very well. So I think that they had gone out and celebrated. And of course, like, it's one of those things where the people I'm trying to sell to are on the East Coast. So it's like 1 p.m. and they're like, we really need an answer. And like, it's 10 a.m. here. And it's like very early in Hawaii. And he was just not doing well. But like any really good friend, like told me what he thought, and really was like, I think you're not done doing what you're doing. And yeah, kudos to my coach. Like, we had gotten through financial disclosure. They had looked at our books. Like Molly and I had job offers. Like it was like, it wasn't the 11th hour. It was like 11:45. And I talked to them and said, you know what? I'm really sorry. I don't mean to head fake you guys, but I just can't do this. And they were like, that's fine. And I stayed with my coach for another, 2 seasons. But until I stopped doing triathlon. And it was great. It was really, it was good. Kudos to them for keeping it business and not making it personal. It was really great.
What struck me, what you just said about stopping doing triathlon, the question was like, you can stop?
Oh yeah. Yeah. You stop running. And
just buy a gravel bike.
Yeah. You buy a gravel bike and you get into cross country skiing, and then you start researching biathlon rifles. And that's how you leave triathlon.
Got it.
It's the only way.
That's it. Yeah. That's the exit, everybody. That's how you leave this sport. Hotel California.
Molly, I'd love to know or hear you talk about how the philosophy of Campfire Endurance has changed since that time when it was brought back to life. How's your philosophy changed?
I think I helped with the healthier part of that. That was one of the big additions, that we were faster, happier. Now we're faster, happier, healthier. My background is in public health, and I am very passionate about like healthy lifestyles for everybody. Not because of necessarily the health outcomes, but because I think that that's a real valid pathway to happiness. And I think that faster, happier, and healthier all have to work together. We see so many athletes with so much capacity and like love of the sport who get burned out because it takes over their life in a way that doesn't lead to their ultimate happiness, or really probably to their better health. And so I think keeping all of those things in mind allows us to work with athletes in a way that's going to be more holistic, and allow them to pursue goals in and around triathlon, and to kind of like come in and out of the sport in ways that are important throughout their lifetime in this. And we do hope this is something that they can do for a lifetime. So I think that for a lot of athletes, that's sort of all or nothing, especially as you get into the longer distance races. And I think that one of the things that we're very vocal about is that there is a place for everybody, no matter how involved you are in the sport, and that you are essential to the community, regardless of where you are in the pack. And I think that is important to being happy, and to allowing your larger health to lead your activity. So I think that's one of the big things that I've brought. And other than that, I am terse. Like our materials are significantly shorter now because of me, and I think that's something I'm very proud of.
Molly does bring a very well needed editorial approach to my somewhat rambunctious prose style.
That's fantastic. Well, you mentioned burnout. What are some indicators that an athlete is getting burned out?
Not having fun anymore. That's a big one. It's hard because volume's big in endurance sports, and so there are always going to be periods where you're tired, and where fatigue is an expected outcome, and a reasonable outcome, and an okay outcome to have. But long periods of unhappiness with the sport is not good, and that's not necessarily something to push through. And that's been something that Chris and I have been talking about a lot this year. Chris and I coach each other. It's one of the ways that like we keep this business on the same track. And I had a big season last year, and was really feeling some burnout as we came into this year, as my season got started. And one of the things that we tried to do was really like walk the talk that we have been trying to get our athletes to buy into, which is to just let like joy be the rally call to like lead your activities. And that's been really important to me this year. This is a year that I really wanted to make some room for things. I got married. A lot of changes have happened, and I wanted to be there for those in a way that I wasn't really before, when I had like 6-hour bike rides to fit in. And I think that, burnout can certainly lead to overtraining and to a lot of like physiological things that that are definitely not good for athletes' health or well-being or speed. But it doesn't have to. So I think just having an eye on what you find entertaining and fun and joyful, and allowing yourself to listen to that and to follow that is really important. And sometimes that means that you have to do a 20-hour gravel vision quest. And sometimes that means that you have to step back from the sport and like find other places for joy in the community, like volunteering at races or, being part of, I love coaching, and I feel like I am more invested in coaching sometimes when I have a little bit more space from my own athletic endeavors. And so I think it's good to like come and go from the sport in ways that like allows you to have balance in your life. So it's burnout is like the specter of the sport, and keeping an eye out for it and knowing how to get around it is probably one of the things that we do the most of.
That's a great answer, right? Let joy sort of lead you, look for happiness. Chris, talk to me about what type of athletes you like to work with. Like what's a good client for you?
The short answer is we really like working with the full spectrum of athletes. That's a bit of a cop-out, but we sometimes get, I think a lot of times people look at us and think like, oh, they only coach like fast people, or like coaches are only for people who are fast, that sort of thing. And we hate that. like one of the things we really try to say is that fast and slow are relative terms. There's always somebody faster, there's always somebody slower. They're not helpful terms. This whole sport is about improvement, if that's what you're after, improvement and happiness and like learning about yourself. That said, we have discovered that the athletes we really enjoy working with are the ones who meet us on the communication part of our company. Communication is Molly does all of our sales and intake calls, and then I do a bunch of the marketing materials. But really sending the message that like our coaches, if you're not communicating with your coach, like very often your coach will start sending you messages like, hey, I haven't heard from you. Like, please jump on my schedule, update my training peaks, let me know how you're doing. The way that we work is all of our athletes get 2 45-minute phone calls a week. If they leave a comment in training peaks, their coach has to give them a reply. There's unlimited emails, unlimited text, like all of the avenues to communication are open. The athletes that we have that have success are the ones that use those avenues of communication. The athletes we have that don't have the success that they could have are the ones that don't use those avenues of communication. And it is so frustrating for a coach to plan workouts and hear nothing from their athletes. It's because you have no idea. Like, sure, the workout was done. It's green in Training Peaks' terrible rubric for compliance, which everybody, you can turn that off. Just go to your settings in Training Peaks, turn off the compliance coding. This is my little this is the hill I'm going to die on in triathlon, is turn off the Training Peaks color coding for compliance. There's more context than whether the workout was done in some amount of time. Those are the athletes we want to work with, are the ones who do their workouts and let us know whether they went well, whether they went poorly, or whether something unexpected happened. Because then we're actually doing coaching. Coaching is not about writing workouts. It is about energy management. And we cannot manage your energy if we don't know what your energy is.
I had no idea you could turn off those colors in Training Peaks.
Do it now.
In fact, I tend to round up a little bit on my times when I do something independent that's not syncing through my Garmin.
Yeah, isn't that great? You're basically fibbing. He basically
Right.
said that to meet the demands of a computer program that doesn't care about it.
You're robot overlords.
Yep.
And I wonder why when I get to the finish line, I'm not hitting my PRs, right? Like continue to round up. So Molly, we're talking about technology. Where do you see coaching going in the future, next 5 years, with respect to technology, with respect to philosophy? Like, what does coaching look like 5 years from now?
I think this is a really timely question, especially with the announcement of Ironman's new coaching platform. But I really think that that coaching is about to start to distinguish itself between people who are operators of technology and people who are like independent thinkers and experts in the world that we work in. I think it is about to become a lot more clear to both athletes and coaches whose expertise is driving their coaching and who is outsourcing that. And I think that that's probably something that technology is going to support. I think that that is going to be probably good and bad for a lot of people, because I think that it may well eliminate some like human error, and human error is a big part of coaching at the beginning of your coaching experience, especially like I can't even, there are so many mistakes that I made early on that I look back on and I'm like, how did I let that happen? And I think that could be a place that technology is really effective in like double checking and giving you some checks and balances for whether or not you're going in the right direction with an athlete. But I think that in general, the communication that we rely on isn't just because that's the way we like to coach. It's because that is what gives us the most insight into the athletes that we're working with, which gives us an ability to coach them in the way that is going to work for them. And I think that most athletes will respond to the same kind of training to a certain point, but beyond that point, in order to get someone to their potential, you have to train them in the way that they need. And I think that technology is going to be at a disadvantage with that as the sport moves forward. But I think we're definitely living in interesting times. I wish that the weird power metric on all of our run files would just go away without having to ask our athletes to turn it off. But there are pluses and minuses, I think, like anything, but I'm a little bit more, I suspect that the technology is not at the place where it's being lauded at right now.
Very, very insightful. Chris, you mentioned earlier in our show about camps that you put on. Can you talk to us a little bit more about your camps?
Yeah, totally. We love our camps. They are, sort of like Molly was just talking about technology. Like no like professional coach and professional athlete use technology the way that the triathlon world like wants people to use technology. Like professional coaches and professional athletes operate on how are you feeling? And I'm feeling X. And we try to do the same thing with our camps. Like our camps are basically a copy of the professional camps that exist out in the world, and they are hard. We do almost every day we do all three sports, and because that's what camp is like. That's what it's supposed to be like. You are there to get more training into a unit time than you're able to do when you are home and working and and managing your family and all of those things. And a training camp should, if you are, kind of interfacing correctly with the training camp, allow you more stimulus per unit time without the threat of injury. Because like you can always park more stimulus per unit time, but you will get hurt pretty quickly. And so we really try to hit a balance of the correct amount of stimulus for every person that comes in. So we have questions on the intake form. We have standards. Please be able to ride 50 miles on your bike without stopping. Stuff like that. And we really try to do as many things as we can for them. So we take care of lodging, we take care of breakfast, we take care of all the workouts. We tell them that they should go home and go to bed. We tell them that they should go home and go to sleep. in between workouts. We tried to get a lot of like professional guests, and Molly and I always do a lecture of our own at camps. And yeah, it really should be a pretty intense thing. Our big camp is usually in Bend every year. We've had a Bend camp every year since 2013, I think. And it's in mid-June, June 7th to June 11th. If you're interested, everybody should come. We got 5 spots left. It's a blast. Ideally, you are bone tired at the second to last workout on Monday afternoon. And then we have one final swim on Tuesday. That's always fun. You may have seen in a lot of our marketing materials a drill of 2 people swimming and doing a high five. That's not staged. That's an actual drill. Molly brought that. It's for integrating somebody else into your swimming so you can deal with it once you're actually out in the open water. And it's a really fun way to go out. But yeah, those are our camps. They're always a blast. Yeah, we love running them.
And I assume they're not only for your coaching clients, they're
Correct.
So Molly, how could an audience member get in touch with you and Camp Endurance?
So you can email
Campfire
us
Endurance.
that is our email address. So that is super helpful. It's info@campfireendurance.com, or you can go to our website, and this is really the best way to do it. Go to our website and sign up for a free coaching consult. Those are a chance to talk to a coach about your season, and we have a lot of ways that athletes can engage with us, from one-to-one coaching to our new team membership, for people who want to be a little bit more self-directed or who feel like coaching's not quite right for them at the moment. We're trying to make options for everybody depending on where they're at currently. So you can get on the website, www.campfireendurance.com, and sign up for a free consult there. Or info@campfireendurance.com will go to both me and Chris.
Awesome. And we'll have that in the show notes. Chris, any last words or thoughts before we close this out today?
No, this is really fun. But yeah, everybody keep trying to find the joy in your training and racing. It will make you faster.
That's very well said. Well, both of you, thank you, Molly. Thank you, Chris. I could pepper you with questions for the next 2 hours as I'm procrastinating on getting on my bike for this afternoon. But your time has been really valuable. The audience members who got some value out of today, please like this show. Please subscribe to this podcast. Please listen to Molly and Chris's advice. Check out their camps. Check out their website. If you don't have a coach, you should get a coach. It's almost unacceptable not to have a coach to be in this industry. I depend on mine every day, and I'm going to reply back to her email right when we get off this podcast. But again, Molly, Chris, it's awesome to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Greg.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you for tuning in to the Chief Endurance Officer podcast. To hear more inspiring stories and strategies around the endurance mindset, be sure to subscribe below or visit us at chiefenduranceofficer.com. Until next time, keep pushing those limits.